Anyone who saw Tito walking downtown on a Tuesday afternoon would undoubtedly assume he was a man to whom life had dealt a draw. He wore cotton pants frayed at the edges, a neutral-toned shirt that betrayed comfort but never luxury, and a black resin Casio watch that told time with the same millimeter precision as a Rolex, yet cost less than an executive lunch. Tito drove a gray Toyota sedan that was nearly a decade old. He kept it impeccably clean, with tires in good condition and a tuned engine. But to the prejudiced eyes of society, it was simply the car of a guy who was just getting by. Just another member of the immense, exhausted, anonymous mass struggling day by day to make ends meet and pay the bills before the power gets cut off. No one, absolutely no one in his lower middle-class residential neighborhood, in the hallways of his office, or in the noisy circle of his extended family, suspected the truth. Tito was a millionaire. He had perfectly mastered an ancient art brilliantly adapted to the modern economy, a strategy he internally called the shield of invisibility. It wasn't about morbid stinginess, nor a self-imposed punishment denying himself the fundamental pleasures of existence. It was a profound tactical decision, a psychological, emotional, and financial armor against a world he considered deeply sick, intoxicated by external validation and rapacious consumerism. To understand Tito, one had to understand the echo of his childhood. He grew up in a house where the end of the month was synonymous with terror. He remembered with painful clarity the nights he woke up at dawn to find his father sitting at the kitchen table, illuminated only by the dim light of the extractor hood, surrounded by stacked bills with his head in his hands. He remembered his mother's muffled crying when there wasn't enough for new school shoes. Money, or the lack of it, was a ghost that haunted the walls of his home, suffocating laughter and withering dreams. From the age of 10, Tito made a silent promise, burned into his childlike soul: he would never be a slave to debt. He would never allow his peace of mind to bear the logo of a bank. Years later, life rewarded his obsessive discipline. His software ventures, created during sleepless nights, scaled silently, far away from the spotlights of business magazine covers. Suddenly, Tito's bank accounts began to show figures that would have given his father a heart attack out of sheer disbelief. His first instinct, fueled by decades of social conditioning, repressed pain, and aggressive advertising, was revenge. He wanted to go straight to a European import car dealership. He wanted to smell the new leather. He wanted the engine to roar in the streets of his old neighborhood so everyone would know the ruined accountant's son had resoundingly triumphed. He wanted to be looked at with envy. He wanted to feel that he was finally worth something. But the afternoon he was supposed to sign the papers for the sports car, a local news broadcast paralyzed him in front of his apartment's television. A businessman his own age had been murdered in cold blood in broad daylight, at a traffic light just 3 blocks from his home. The assailants didn't want his life. They wanted the solid gold Swiss watch peeking out his window and the German SUV fresh from the dealership. Tito saw the images of the yellow police tape fluttering in the wind, the dark stain on the asphalt. He felt a freezing knot in his stomach. A brutal flash of lucidity illuminated his mind. In this concrete jungle, desperate and cruel, displaying bright colors doesn't make you a king. It instantly turns you into prey. It puts a target on your back. He cried that night. He cried for the dead businessmen, but he also cried saying goodbye to his own ego. He understood that the need to show off wasn't a symbol of success, but a cry of profound insecurity. He then decided irrevocably to become the gray man. He canceled the purchase of the sports car. He began to move through the world without leaving the slightest trace of his true purchasing power. Walking toward his old, reliable gray Toyota at night in lonely parking lots, Tito breathed a peace so immense, so profound, that no amount of admiring glances on the street could equal. No urban predator noticed him. He was a ghost, a boring and invisible shadow, unreachable by crime. That invisibility extended to his digital life. Tito deleted all his social media. While his old college classmates begged for likes posting photos on rented yachts in Miami or showing off champagne bottles with sparklers in dark nightclubs, Tito dropped off the radar. He was sick of the falsehood of the digital showcase. Cyber criminals and scammers passed him by. Tito had built an impregnable bunker woven with threads of apparent comforting mediocrity. The real battlefield, however, wasn't in the streets or on the internet. It was in his parents' dining room. The Sunday following his revelation, he attended the traditional family barbecue. There was his cousin Leo, the pride of the family. Leo had just been appointed commercial director at a multinational company, and his arrival at the barbecue was a spectacle worthy of royalty. He appeared in an immense black SUV that took up 2 parking spaces, wearing a linen shirt with a giant logo embroidered on the chest, shoes that cost a worker's monthly salary, and handing out imported cigars to the uncles as if he were a condescending benefactor. The family dynamic that subsequently unfolded turned Tito's stomach as he watched everything from his discreet corner, sitting on a plastic chair with a glass of water in his hand. As soon as Leo boasted about his juicy new annual bonus, the family's behavior mutated. Unconditional love gave way to subtle greed disguised as need. The sharks began to circle. Uncle Mario, a man who had never held a job for more than a year, cornered Leo by the grill, putting an arm around his shoulders. Leto, my dear nephew, I have a business on my hands, an import company. Safe, 100% safe. I just need a little angel investor to lend me $50,000. For you, that's nothing, right? Then came Leo's sister, who between crocodile tears insinuated that, since he was doing so wonderfully, he should cover the cost of her niece's wedding at a 5-star hotel to keep the family name held high. And of course, when the inevitable time came to order more expensive meat and liquor, everyone present fell into a thick, complicit silence. No one took out their wallet. Everyone looked at Leo, the winner, the flesh and blood ATM. Leo, trapped in the suffocating web of his own ego and the terrifying need not to disappoint his audience, pulled out his golden credit card, smiling broadly. But Tito, who knew how to read people's eyes, noticed the raw terror in his cousin's gaze. He noticed the slight tremble in his hand as he handed over the plastic, and the cold sweat beading on his forehead. Leo wasn't paying for a party. He was paying a ransom for his own image. Minutes later, Uncle Mario approached Tito. He looked him up and down, stopping at his worn-out shoes. He gave him a condescending, humiliating pat on the cheek. "Oh, Tito, look at you! Still with the same little gray car, with the same clothes as always. You lack ambition, boy. You need to learn from your cousin Leo. Now he is a winner. Let's see if one of these days you wake up. Go on, go to the kitchen and fetch me some ice." The words were like acid. For a fraction of a second, bile rose in Tito's throat. The wounded child inside him wanted to scream. He wanted to take out his mobile phone, open his investment bank app, and rub the 7 zeros dancing on his screen right in Uncle Mario's face. He wanted to scream that he could buy the entire house they were standing in and demolish it the next day just on a whim. But he took a deep breath. He clenched his fists inside his pockets until his knuckles turned white and swallowed hard. He smiled sincerely, nodded kindly, and said, "You're right, Uncle. I'll get the ice." His invisibility worked. It hurt, yes. The price of being a giant disguised as a dwarf was that the real dwarves stepped on you, but by appearing to be a failure, absolutely no one asked him for money as a sunk cost. No one saw him as a resource to exploit. He was free from emotional blackmail. The reward for that painful discipline arrived 6 months later. Tito's mother, the woman who had broken her back washing other people's clothes to pay for his first programming books, fell gravely ill. She urgently needed a heart valve replacement, a highly complex surgery that the depleted public health system scheduled years out. The family panicked. Miserable collections were organized. There was talk of mortgaging the old house. Uncle Mario cried in the corners without contributing a dime, and Leo, the millionaire, suddenly disappeared, arguing his bonuses were tied up in illiquid stocks. Tito said nothing. That same afternoon, he showed up at the financial department of the country's most prestigious private clinic. He wore his usual frayed jacket. The receptionist looked at him with disdain. Tito pulled out his black card, the one he never used in public, and paid the entirety of the surgery, the medical fees, the VIP recovery suite, and a private at-home nurse for 6 months. He demanded they sign a strict non-disclosure agreement with the hospital. The next morning, the medical director called the family, feigning surprise, to inform them that an anonymous international foundation had selected their mother's case to cover all expenses. The family wept with joy and prayed to the heavens. That night, Tito sat alone in his old gray Toyota, parked in the darkness of the hospital garage. He rested his forehead against the worn plastic steering wheel and began to cry. He cried with an intensity that tore at his chest, but they were tears of pure, absolute, and overwhelming victory. There was no applause for him. There were no statues in his name. There was only him, the silence, and his mother's newly repaired heart beating strong. That day, Tito understood that true power needs no audience. The national economy, always volatile and cruel, suffered a drastic setback. Inflation skyrocketed, devouring salaries, and interest rates became suffocating. It was then that Leo, desperate, invited Tito for a coffee in a gloomy downtown bar, far from the trendy places he used to frequent. Leo arrived 30 minutes late, and when he walked in, Tito barely recognized him. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He dragged his feet, had dark circles reaching down to his cheekbones, and a constant tremor in his hands. The imposing black SUV had become his rolling coffin. The monthly loan payment added to the premium insurance and the credit card spinning to the max to maintain the farce had him on the verge of a psychiatric collapse. "Tito, my life is a lie," Leo confessed, bursting into tears in the middle of the cafe, not caring who saw him. Tears fell onto the stained table. "I make so much money, but it's not mine. It belongs to the bank, to the dealership, to the country club. I can't sleep, Tito. I wake up at 3 in the morning with tachycardia, feeling like I'm suffocating. If I don't get my commissions next month, they'll take my house. My wife says she'll leave me if we lose our status. I feel like I'm running on a treadmill on the verge of a heart attack, and if I stop for a second, I die. I'm trapped, brother. I'm dead inside." Tito felt an immense, painful compassion for his cousin. He reached out and took Leo's hand, squeezing it tightly. Leo had fallen fully into the deadly trap of appearances, the poison of lifestyle inflation. For every coin Leo earned, he spent 2 so strangers would know he had earned it. He was the most miserable slave of all, because he lived in a cell with solid gold bars that he had forged himself. In the silence that followed, Tito's mind reviewed the abyss separating their 2 lives. Those thousands of dollars Leo had burned on the altar of vanity each month to pay for his car and his fleeting luxuries, Tito had been religiously investing in index funds. The long-term difference was a mathematical tragedy. Leo bought rustable metal to feed his fragile ego. Tito bought silent, productive assets that worked for him day and night. Leo was the spitting image of what society mistakenly defines as rich. High income, higher debts. Tito was invisible but possessed an invulnerable wealth. He had given up the envious stares at traffic lights in exchange for buying back his own soul. The ultimate trial by fire, the moment where Tito's philosophy demonstrated its epic magnitude, arrived on a gray, cold Tuesday morning. In the corporate tech firm where Tito still worked, solely because he genuinely enjoyed the intellectual challenge, not for the paycheck, a terrifying rumor spread that the international board had ordered the immediate layoff of 40% of the staff to save the quarterly profit margins. Raw, animal panic seized the glass offices. Grown men and women, successful professionals in expensive suits, openly cried in their cubicles. They called their spouses with trembling voices, frantically calculating how many months they had left before losing their homes, their cars, their children's private schools. The tension was so thick it was suffocating. Leo, who worked in the same sector, called Tito, hyperventilating, his voice broken by absolute terror. "Tito, they're firing half my floor. If they knock on my door today, it's over. The bank takes everything. I'll shoot myself, Tito. I swear to you, I'll shoot myself. I couldn't bear it. What are you going to do? Aren't you terrified?" Tito listened to his cousin, offered words of comfort in a low tone, and gently hung up the phone. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair and looked out the large window at the overcast city sky. He placed 2 fingers on his neck to feel his pulse. 60 beats per minute. His heart beat with the calm of a Zen monk in deep meditation. He scanned his mind, searching for a single drop of fear, of anguish for the future, of terror of ruin. He found nothing. There was only peace, a peace so vast and powerful it felt invincible. If the HR director walked through his door that instant with a cardboard box and his termination letter, Tito wouldn't cry. He would stand up, give her a warm handshake thanking her for the experience, grab his worn-out jacket, and leave with a relieved smile. Thanks to his unwavering decision to lead a modest life, to endure the humiliations of fools, and to his strict stealth wealth strategy, Tito had saved and invested the equivalent of 20 uninterrupted years of living expenses. His dividend portfolio passively generated, while he slept, twice what he needed to live comfortably. The job was a hobby. The company didn't own him. At 5 in the afternoon, he survived the cull. He watched his devastated colleagues leave, carrying boxes, their lives shattered by a system designed to keep them on the edge of the abyss through debt. Tito went down to the street, and the freezing rain hit his face. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the damp afternoon air. Walking toward his old car amidst the terrified crowd, he had a dazzling epiphany that brought a warm tear to his eye. Money, that cursed human invention for which people kill, betray, and consume each other, should never ever be used to buy dead objects or the hollow admiration of people who don't care about you. Money, when its true, sacred nature is understood and used with wisdom and stoicism, serves to buy the only true treasure in the universe, time. Tito was free. Totally, absolutely, and gloriously free. He could wake up tomorrow at 10 in the morning if he wanted to. He could quit, pack a backpack, and disappear into the mountains of Patagonia for a year. He could dedicate himself to learning to play the piano or simply sit on a wooden park bench to watch the pigeons fly. No one owned his mornings. No one owned his anxiety. He had conquered his own existence. He had won, under his own secret rules, the hardest game in the modern world. And the most sublime thing, the final poetry of his gigantic victory, he thought as he opened the door of his humble, scratched, and wonderful gray Toyota, is that in a city of 3 million people obsessed with window display success, absolutely no one had realized he was the king.